All right, next recipe we are going to make is a sea cap classic salad. We're going to start with the emulsified vinaigrette. So for that, we are going to use our shallots, lime, make sure we have our oil, salt, pepper, sugar, our vinegar, and our Dijon mustard. So to start, we're going to take our shallot and we are going to small brunoise this. So with that, we're just going to cut off the edge, which we're going to place that into our compost bin. And we're going to just to take and go sideways, not all the way through, but about 3/4 of the way through, horizontally. Turn it toward us and do the same at the top. We're going to cut this on 3 cuts. So it's like that. And if you want to take your same smaller knife and you're just going to do small brunoise. All the way till you get about 3/4 down. Put this to the side. So you have just small little pieces of shallot. All right, we're going to push this off to the side for a second. And we're going to go ahead and cut our lime in half. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our bowl. But before we do that, we are going to grab a towel. We're going to get it just damp. And we're going to make a rope out of it. This is going to be the landing spot for our bowl. So an easier way to make a vinaigrette, we want the bowl to be stable. And since we only have 2 hands, we're going to use this as kind of the third hand, if you will. So from there, we're going to go ahead and add our lime juice. So for any vinaigrette we're doing, we do 3 parts oil to 1 part acid. So our acid for the recipe is lime juice and vinegar. So we're going to do squeeze the lime. We're going to add our vinegar to that. We're then going to add half of this shallot. We don't need all of it. We just need about half of it for this vinaigrette. The rest we will put in our compost bin, but to cut it, it's easier to cut most of it. From there, we are going to we have 2 teaspoons here, but we may not need all of this. So we're going to start with about half. So we have our lime juice, we have our vinegar, we have our shallot. We're adding half of our Dijon mustard. So we need the Dijon, which will help emulsify the vinaigrette. So in the bowl, we have our lime juice, we have our vinegar, we have half of our shallot, and half of our Dijon. So the Dijon is what is going to emulsify the vinaigrette. So without that, the vinaigrette would just separate eventually. So from there, we are going just to whisk to combine all those ingredients together. At this point, we have not added any seasoning and we have not added the oil. So you want to get everything in there. Okay. So we are then going to add just a pinch of sugar. We want a little bit of sweetness in there. We're going to add a little bit of pinch of salt and a pinch of black pepper. Mix that together. And this is where we're going to start gradually adding our oil. So this is where this bowl, this towel under the bowl is going to help us. So it's going to anchor this bowl to the table. So we're going to go just back and forth, front to top, and slowly drizzle the oil. What we're doing is incorporating a little bit of air, but also we're going to make sure that the vinegar and lime juice and the oil stay together, which the mustard helps that, but the whisking also adds to that. So as we add more and more oil, we're just going to increase the surface area of which we're whisking. And just literally a drizzle at a time. And you want to keep vigorously whisking. You don't really want to stop. And as you go, you can see that the texture and the viscosity of it's gotten a little bit thicker. This is something that you just have to be patient with. You cannot rush this. You can't add all the oil at once or it will separate. So the recipe that we're making is the volume of it's going to be greater than what we actually need when we toss all the vegetables in there. But you need to make more of amounts to be able to emulsify it correctly. So we won't use the end, all of this. And you're going to keep going. You want to make sure you use all of the oil. As you can see, it's starting to get thicker. And that towel under the bowl really helps because the bowl's not really moving. So if you're trying to do this just with one hand, it makes it a little more difficult. So once we get all the oil in, we want to just get a little bit more vigorous in there and make sure it's all comes together. And just like that. And now we're going to put this onto the ice just to let chill and stay cold until we're ready for it. So we're going to continue making the C-Cap classic salad recipe. We're actually going to make the salad portion of it now. So we're going to start with our tomato concasse. So what we want to do is just score the very bottom, just slightly score it. Just make an X mark at the bottom. X marks the spot. And then we're going to core just the very top out with our paring knife. Just kind of cut around to take the core out, just like that. And we're going to stick that into our boiling water. That is going to cook for anywhere from 30 seconds, 45 seconds or so. And then we're going to pull that out and put it in our ice water to shock it. So we're going to take our tomato out of the water. The skin has just split slightly. And we're going to go ahead and put this in our ice and let that cool off. What we don't want to do is overcook it. So we just want it to where the skin is going to split. So you want to stay with the tomato the entire cooking process so you do not overcook it. All right, we're going to continue to chop our vegetables for this and cut them. I do have an extra pan that all of our vegetables are going to go into, so we can mix them together. I'm going to put that to the side. The first thing we are going to cut is our bell pepper. So for the bell pepper, we want to clean a little bit of this out first before we continue. So I'm just going to take my knife and just go sideways, just cutting the rib meat, not cutting all the way through, just to get a clean edge. Put that in the compost. We're going to do the same with our yellow bell pepper. So we're cutting just a little bit of the rib off of it, just to make it even. We might cut a little bit more of this red off. But just under the rib meat, nothing more than that. All right, so we are going to small dice all of these vegetables. Small dice is 1/4 inch is what we're looking for. So the easiest way to do that is once you clean both of these, we want to make sure that our skin side is down when we're cutting. It makes it easier to cut because there's less resistance. So we want to go ahead and just gauge about 1/4 and cut those into strips. Just even strips all the way down. If we have something that's not as even, we're going to go ahead and put that on our compost. So you should have even strips, about 1/4 inch in size. We're going to make sure they're all skin side down again. We're going to push those to the side. We're going to go ahead and cut our yellow bell pepper. So what we do to one, we do to all. So we want to cut all of the red, then cut all of the yellow. So again, same all the way down. And any sort of edge that we're not going to use because it's not even, we're going to put to the side. So from there, we'll continue to cut our yellow. So we're going to square it off. So now the pieces are laying horizontally. We're just going to cut and square off so it's an even side. We're going to take this and put this in our compost so it doesn't get mixed in. And then we're going to go ahead and start small dicing. Just even stroke all the way through. So there's no hesitation, just cutting straight through. Anything that's on the very end that's not even, we're going to move over. And we're gonna go and look through and make sure anything that is not exactly a 1/4 inch in size, we're gonna go ahead and move around. We do have a little thing here to measure. So we're gonna get as close to that as possible, and there you go. We're gonna take that. So we have our cup here. We're gonna go ahead and put our small dice yellow bell pepper in there. Then move on to our red. Do the same to the red. We're gonna square it off. And make sure we are dicing it all the way down evenly. Then we get to the end. Look through, make sure we have everything uniformly cut, and we're gonna add that to our bin. Anything that we didn't want to use, we're gonna discard. So there wasn't a tremendous amount of waste on that, just a little bit on the ends. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our red onion. So the red onion, we're gonna go ahead and peel the skin off, put that in our compost bin. The very center of it, we're gonna go ahead and peel off. And then we're just gonna take this into sections. So we're not trying to cut the whole entire onion at once. So from here, we're gonna cut off just the end of each side. That is not a usable portion. And we're gonna treat it just like we did with the bell peppers. So skin side down. We're gonna go ahead and just 1/4 inch those till they're strips. We're gonna do the next section the same way. Skin side down, 1/4 inch strips. And this last section is gonna be a little bit more difficult just because it's smaller, but we're gonna go ahead and do it again. Some of the smaller pieces you're gonna discard into your compost bin. And this one we're gonna go ahead and discard. So similarly that we did to the bell pepper, we're gonna go ahead and cut this the same way. Any part that maybe is discolored or didn't make it, we're gonna line them all up. We're gonna square them off again and go ahead and cut them in 1/4 inch. So the very ends we're gonna discard, and the center we will keep. So at this point, we are going to wipe our cutting board with our sanitizer to get clean. So we have our sanitizer. We're gonna wipe everything off. We're gonna clean our knife, put it back in. Now we are going to reset. Because there's a lot of water in those vegetables, we wanna make sure the cutting board is clean so we don't slip on anything. All right, the next thing we're gonna cut is jicama. So we're gonna, the easiest way to do this is to square this off. We're gonna compost the ends. Then we're gonna peel any of the skin. So just with our simple peeler, we're just gonna peel the ends. So we get as much of the jicama as possible without having to cut that with our knife. So the skin is a little bit fibrous, so you just wanna simply peel this. If it's easier for you to do it with a knife, you can, but I find this easier. I'm just gonna peel it till all the skin is off. And if there's any discolored area, you're just gonna peel down till it's gone. You're gonna put this in your compost bin. And now we have an evenly peeled. So we're gonna take this and treat it just like we did the others. We're gonna slice it into sections. So this little triangle section is not gonna be even, so we're gonna discard that right away. So we're gonna cut this into more slabs, if you will, for a 1/4 inch. And from there, we're gonna take each section and cut them into 1/4 inch pieces or strips, just like we did with the other vegetables. We're gonna square this off, get rid of our excess, and again, cut them into simple 1/4 inch cubes, just like that. and put them in our mix. The rest we will put in our compost bin, so not a tremendous amount of waste on that. From there, we are going to take some of our cilantro. So this cilantro, we are going to chiffonade. Some of this will go into the actual salad, some of it will go into the vinaigrette. So we're gonna take this and lay it out. And if it has any spots, remove those. What we're gonna do is just pick the actual leaves of the cilantro. A little bit of the stem is okay, but we wanna not save that. So we're gonna do the stems. Like that. We'll put these off to the side. We're just going to create a little pile of it, so just laying on top of each other. So what we're going to do now is just simply chiffonade. So chiffonade is essentially you're going to almost fine julienne the herb. That way we're not cutting it to where it's going to turn black or brown and discolor. We're just going to do very simple knife cuts. So just a simple slicing of it. So the least amount that we can cut this, the better it's going to be. So just like that, very simple. They're not very big pieces. So we're going to take half of this and add it to our actual salad mixture just on top. And we're going to take the other half that we have here, the help of our knife, and we're going to put that into our vinaigrette. So the vinaigrette is going to have, that's been sitting there, that's still emulsified, so it still should look like thick like that. We're going to add this to it. So the acid that's in this vinaigrette is going to help bring out the flavor of the cilantro. So we want some of this in our vinaigrette. Put that back on our ice. So the next thing we're going to do to the salad is add our concassé tomato. So it had time to cool in our ice. We're going to just remove the skin. The skin should remove pretty easily. But it shouldn't be taking a lot of the meat of the tomato off. If it is, you've overcooked it. But the skin should just come off very easily like that. We're going to put that in our compost bin. And from there, we're going to cut this into quarters. We're going to put the flat side down, and then we're going to take this and just take out the seeds and anything that's touching the seeds. So simply like that, similar to how we did with the peppers. We're going to discard that. We're going to take it and remove the seeds. And if there's any residual seed left, we can always just use our hand to get it out. Make sure all the seeds are out. The seed. Remove the seed. All right. Make sure there's no seeds left. So we're going to cut this exactly the same way we've cut all the other vegetables. We're going to go in a 1/4 inch dice, a 1/4 inch dice, or slice, I should say. So again, what we do to one, we do to all. So we want to dice them, we want to slice them all at once and then dice them all. So these, you can do it in sections. So where you're going to square it off. And again, evenly smooth. Take the center, put it in our pan, square it off again. And add that. All right, we're gonna wipe our cutting board off again before we move on to the cucumber. Take a clean towel and just wipe any excess water we have. All right, so now we have our cucumber. So depending on how big the cucumber is, how wide it is. You want to make sure that for the actual outside rim, we want to have a pretty even section. So if it's not even on one end or the other, find the section that's the most even, because that's what you want your uniformity of your circles to be that you cut. So this is pretty even in the center, so I'm just gonna square out or take the center out, and I'm gonna use the rest of it, or some of it anyway, to put into our salad. I'm gonna put this aside, and we're gonna start cutting the cucumber to put in our salad. We're gonna cut this the exact same way we just did the tomato. So we're going to quarter it. We are going to take out the seeds, just like that. And that's enough right there. Then we are going to cut it like we did the others. This one's a little bit easier. You don't have to square it off because you already did. So we are going to small dice these all the way through. Small dice those. Remember always to keep your fingers away from the knife. All right. So from there, we are going to slice rings for our ring mold. So the best thing to do to make sure we're doing this correctly is we never want to get too close to it. So we're not trying to get down to look right at it. You don't want to change your stance. You want to keep your stance when you're cutting the exact same, whether you're cutting a ring, a square, a rectangle, a triangle, anything. You want to keep your stance the same. So when you're doing it, you want to make sure that you have your claw, you're tucking, and you really, I'm going to turn it towards you so you can see it a bit, but you're really only going to gauge just the slightest bit to cut off. So slow and methodical at first until you can get the right technique. So you really just want to go slow and methodical as you're going through until you're really comfortable doing it a little bit faster. So it's not slow as you're not going to finish, but slow enough that you're going to get even slices. The only way to really perfect this is to practice. So the more that you're slicing something, the easier it gets. If you only do it one time or two times or three times, it's going to be hard for you. So do it as many times as you can, practice, because it gets easier every time you do it. And you see how they're evenly sliced, they're evenly on the same. I'm not using a part of the cucumber that was skinnier than the other, so you really want that uniformity as much as possible. So really just very simple knife cuts. I'm not trying to go faster than it needs to be. I'm not going slower than it needs to be. Really simple. You don't want to go too thin to where you see all the way through it completely because it won't hold up. And you don't want to go too thick to where it's not going to bend naturally once you put it in the mold. So just really simple all the way down. And you notice when I'm cutting this, the only thing on my cutting board right now is the cucumber. I don't have anything else. I don't have a pile of my diced vegetables. The vinaigrette's away. Just want to focus on this. I'm going to keep going. And until you practice a lot, there's going to be some that you're going to discard. There might be some that, depending on the size, you're going to do about 22 to 24 slices is what you're looking for this recipe. So you're going to need a good amount of the cucumber. So make sure that when you're doing this, you're methodically slicing it. You're really making the effort. Again, I'm not getting closer to it my legs aren't, you know, I'm not at the tripod stance trying to get really close. You don't have as much leverage that way. You want to keep a proper stance as you're doing this. So now we're going to begin to assemble the salad. So we have our vinaigrette that we pulled from the ice that's still nicely emulsified. So what we're going to do now is season it. So we're going to add, we did a little bit of salt and pepper to begin, but we're going to actually taste this first and see if we need to season it a little bit more. So it's going to have a little kick because of the amount of vinegar that's in there, but it needs a little bit of salt and a little bit more black pepper, which you can taste now. The cilantro is starting to come through the flavor, which is nice. But a vinaigrette should have a little acid taste to it. You want to have that really acidic sort of zing to it. So that's good. So the next thing we're going to do is take another clean bowl. We're going to take our vegetables that we have in our deli container. We're going to dump those out. And then we're going to take we're going to start with about a teaspoon or so of the vinaigrette. We'll do 2 here. We're going to go ahead and mix this with our spoon. We want just enough to coat, but not to let it sink in. We don't want it to be wet. We want just enough to coat the vegetables, just enough to kind of get them seasoned with the vinaigrette. So it should just look a little glossy, but it's not sitting in it. So depending on how many vegetables that you cut, so we're going to add just a little bit more. So that was about 2.5 teaspoons. We want to make sure that we're putting them in the vinaigrette almost last, because what's going to happen is that vinegar and that lime juice is going to kind of start to take some of the water that's naturally in all these vegetables and leach it out, which will make them a little bit soggy. So we want to keep them nice and crisp. So that's about all the vinaigrette that we're going to use for that. But we made more, like I said before, when we were making the vinaigrette, we made more vinaigrette than what we needed. So we're learning how to emulsify a vinaigrette. So we made more on purpose, but we're not using that. But you can save that and utilize it for something later on. So from this, we're just going to taste it and see if it needs any more salt and pepper, which it will. So we're going to go ahead and add just another pinch of salt. And you notice I'm not just putting it in one spot. I'm kind of putting it in my fingers and putting it all over. So you want to make sure it all gets evenly seasoned. And same with the pepper. Take another spoon. And mix it. We're going to taste it again. Remember, we're tasting throughout to make sure that it's seasoned properly. So you should be able to taste the salt, the pepper, the vinaigrette. So we're going to set this aside for a second and move on to our cucumbers. So you will have some residual oil left from your vinaigrette. Even though we used it, there's always some that never makes it out of the container. This is what we're going to use just to line the inside of our mold here. So we're going to take my finger. I'm just going to simply line the inside of the mold. This is going to help the cucumbers release once we put everything in there. So if you don't do this, the natural elements that are in the cucumber can get very sticky. We want the stickiness to hold them together, but we don't want it to stick to that. So we're going to take, like we said before, 22 to 24 slices. I have more here just in case. And all you're going to do is you're going to put this down and you're going to shingle them just enough to where I'll lift this in a second. We don't want to cut these. We want to leave the natural circle. So once we do, once I get this started, I'll flip this up and show you. So we're just doing a simple layering inside, if you can see that. So they should stick together. Cucumbers have an amazing ability to be a little bit sticky. So that's why we're using them in this recipe. I'm going to go all the way around. If for some reason they're not uniformly all the same distance from each other, you can take your knife. It does help because it creates a little pressure and you can move them just slightly. But again, we don't want to cut the bottom to make a flat bottom. It's not necessary. We're going to keep going all the way around. Make sure that they're all even. If some of them, you do a little extra just in case, if they're not all perfect to what you want it to be, that's okay. That's why you cut extra. I'm going to keep going all the way around. You don't necessarily need to do this way ahead of time, and you don't want to do it way ahead of time. You want to do it last minute, so then everything sticks together. So when you get towards the end, to make a uniform, so it's evenly all the way around and doesn't have a weird kind of closure, as you can see, if you can see on this side, where it's not even right there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our knife and we're gonna find the other side. That one fell for a second. And we're gonna kind of just combine these together. We're gonna sneak one in there and sneak one in there, just like that, and make them even. So you're gonna have an even shingle all the way around. We're gonna press these, look again, just to make sure they are even. Again, you can use a knife if you need to move them over. But again, those look good. And then from there, we're going to grab our plate. So I'm going to just slide over and grab a plate. So this plate we have already cleaned. We want to make sure that we clean it well before we put anything on it. We're going to go ahead and transfer our cucumbers onto this. We're going to take our mixture, just mix it one last time. And again, we're going to have more vegetables that are going to fit in this container. So we're going to take this and just slowly start filling. And as I fill, I'm going to evenly spread it out. So we're going to create a base to it. Keep going. The way this is going to stay together is if you create even layers. If you just pour it in and there's a gap, those cucumbers will not stay. So we're going to keep going. Keep going. And depending on how tall your cucumbers are, as to how much you're going to fill this. If you have really tall cucumbers, you're going to fill it with more. If you have smaller cucumbers, you're going to fill it with less, and so on. But we're going to make sure we get it all the way to the very top. And as we go through, I'm going to keep stirring to make sure it gets all in there. But what we're not going to add to this is just more liquid. So if you do this too early and set it aside, naturally some of that liquid is going to want to seep out. So we want to do it last minute right before we serve. So we're going to go ahead and just slightly put some pressure on this to, again, just push everything down to make sure that it's even. And notice that I'm in the very center of this plate. We want to make sure we're centered. We want to give this a little bit of rise, so just very slowly. Make sure you're pushing on the outside ring of the cucumber so it evenly comes up. And there you have it, your cucumber salad.